But either way, it's Senator Ted Cruz. Ted, I guess your day job took precedence, right?
Well, Pags, I'm glad to be able to do both. And
well, we're glad to have you on it. You sound like you're out of breath. You probably just ran from the Senate chamber, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Well,
I know how busy a time this is.
In the basement of the Capitol, each of us have these little offices in the Capitol. They're called hideaways, and so I ran down here to call you from the Capitol because I got to run up and vote in another vote in a few minutes.
Well, I appreciate that. So let's get right down to it.
Sure.
Again, it's Senator Ted Cruz, Republican senator from the great state of Texas. I am blown away, impressed, but although I shouldn't be because I'm used to this now from you, how incredible you are, how you went after Al Franken yesterday. Al Franken, we're heard in a couple of stations in Minnesota, also Minneapolis, St. Paul, and believe me, a lot of people listening can't stand this guy. You called him out on a lack of facts when he went after Jeff Sessions. He went after Senator Sessions and made a bunch of crap up that he didn't back up, didn't show any facts, and you went at him, and his answer was, never mind. Tell us how that went down and when you decided I'm not going to just sit here and take it.
Well, sure. I mean, let me say, first of all, I think Jeff Sessions has done a terrific job at his confirmation hearings. He's gone through 2 days of hearings and has been calm and measured, and I think any objective observer would watch the hearings and conclude this is a man who is going to be fair and impartial and faithfully apply the law, which is what we want in an attorney general.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, a lot of the left-wing interest groups and some of the Democratic senators chose to be ugly and go after Jeff personally, and that's despite serving in this body with him, sitting on that bench just a few seats away from him. They nonetheless went after him, and in the instance you just referenced there, tried to impugn Jeff's integrity, and I think it was done in a way that wasn't fair and wasn't accurate. And one of the things I try to do in the Senate, but especially on the Judiciary Committee in a confirmation hearing, is ensure that the facts are fairly presented. And so that's really what I tried to do in each of my rounds of questioning, is lay out the actual facts so that you don't get a one-sided or biased presentation. The truth of the matter is Jeff is someone who spent 30 years in law enforcement and in the Senate defending conservative principles, and I think he's going to be a superb attorney general, and I think that's what anyone looking at the facts ought to conclude.
Al Franken turned into Stuart Smalley very quickly when you challenged him, and I thought that was pretty impressive. So we got to go to Cory Booker, who just a year ago was on the side of Jeff Sessions, joined legislation with him, loved him, high-fived him, belly bumped him, and then now he hits the Senate as a witness. First time ever we've seen a seated senator be a witness in a confirmation hearing against a fellow senator,
right.
And he basically said Jeff Sessions is a big fat racist. Why would he ever join legislation with him if he felt that way about him? And what is this really all about, Ted?
Well, listen, I was disappointed to see Cory do that. I have a good relationship with Cory. He and I are friendly, but I think it's not lost on anyone that Cory is ambitious, and I think the Democratic base, the left wing, is worked up in a lather. And they wanted to see people go after Jeff Sessions. They're angry about the election. They're angry that Hillary lost. They're angry that Donald Trump won.
Yeah.
And I think Cory's remarks today were designed to appease his base. I will say I was gratified, even though I wish he hadn't broken 2 centuries of precedent and testified against a fellow senator in a confirmation hearing. I was nonetheless gratified that Cory showed some modicum of restraint. He could have been much uglier. Some of the left-wing groups are really just over the top in their opposition to Sessions, and I at least appreciated that he refrained from some of the more vile and overheated accusations. That at a minimum was better than it could have been.
Well, now you had some idiot who showed up in hoods and coats and stuff like the KKK as well.
Yep.
I mean, Jeff Sessions prosecuted the KKK, did he not?
Exactly.
I mean, this is all public record. Why are we pretending he didn't?
Well, and it's because the left-wing chatter sphere is fact-free. And so you're right. We had a whole series of protesters who stood up and tried to interrupt the hearings, and they chanted KKK. And one of the things I did yesterday is had a long exchange with Jeff Sessions where I walked through his record going after the KKK. When he was U.S. Attorney, going after the KKK, assisting with the prosecution that put a Klansman on death row and executed him. And it was, in fact, in the state of Alabama, the first execution for white-on-black crime since 1913. I mean, it was a dramatic, and not only that, Jeff Sessions assisted in prosecuting the Klansman's father, who was also a Klansman, and As a result of that also assisted civil litigation against the Klan that bankrupted the Klan. They literally had to sell their headquarters as a result of that. And so I spent some time walking through those facts and the quotes from the prosecutors, the witnesses involved in that, many of whom are African American. And I gave a challenge yesterday. I said, listen, I noticed every time a protester jumped up and began screaming, all the news media ran over with their cameras to take pictures and record it. And I'm sure all of those will appear on the news. I want to challenge the news media. If you're going to show that, then you also need to describe how Jeff Sessions, as a prosecutor, helped put a Klansman on death row and execute him for a horrible racial crime. And you know what? Not a single one of the news networks did that on the 6 o'clock news. They covered the protesters, but the other side of the facts makes it nowhere near the news.
Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of the great state of Texas, also the runner-up for the nomination for Republican for President of the United States, and it was a great run, Ted. I've got to ask you, though, you and I have been talking for years and years,
sure.
and your objective since 2009 has been to repeal and replace Obamacare,
yes,
to get rid of it wholesale. Now you're starting to hear from some rhinos, from some establishment people who, by the way, don't like you very much, which I like.
I hadn't noticed that, Pax.
Yeah, we're starting to notice that they're starting to say, well, maybe we wait 2, 3, 4 months. Maybe we keep parts of Obamacare and then we do a little bit of different. Don't you just need to get rid of that piece of garbage? And you're actually taking steps today to reinstitute your own legislation, aren't you?
That is exactly right. I think what we need to do is repeal every single word of Obamacare. In the time I've been in the Senate, there has been no higher priority for me than repealing the disaster that is Obamacare. And as you remember well, when I campaigned for Senate, that was the number one promise I made over and over again, all across Texas, from East Texas to West Texas to the Panhandle to down to the Valley. I said, if you elect me, I'll fight with every breath in my body to repeal the train wreck that is Obamacare. And this last election was a mandate for change. Donald Trump's victory was a mandate for change. It was people overwhelmingly saying, we don't like the path we're on, and Republicans have now been given something that is rare in history, which is control of the White House, every executive branch in both houses of Congress. I think it's critical that we deliver on our promises. You're right, I introduced again legislation that I've introduced in every Congress, which is legislation to repeal every word of Obamacare. And what I'm urging my colleagues is, listen, we need to keep our words now. We need to do what we promised, repeal it in its entirety, and then we need to turn around and pass common sense health care reform that empowers patients, that expands choice, that reduces prices, that expands availability, and then puts you in charge of your health care with your doctor instead of putting the government in the middle of it.
And that can be done without piecemealing what we have now, right? Just do it. Get rid of it and then do it, start all over, and it's not going to take months, is it?
Well, the question is how obstructionist are the Democrats going to be, and it is entirely possible that on a replacement plan for Obamacare that's common sense reform, the Democrats may well use every procedural tool they can to block it. And so I think it is possible we could find ourselves spending much of this year engaged in those debates if the Democrats decide to be full obstructionist. I hope they don't, but at a minimum, I mean, we're likely to be up much of the night tonight, if not all night tonight, passing out a budget, the sole purpose of which is it provides the procedural vehicle to repeal Obamacare and to put an Obamacare repeal on President Trump's desk. I look forward to finally achieving what we've been promising the American people for 6 years now.
I know how tight your schedule is. One more quick one. You're talking about legislation to actually legislate you out of a job. You're talking about term limits, and so many Americans today are so sick and tired of people being in Washington for 40 years, 50 years, and never wavering on how they feel and no longer representing the people. What are the chances that your cohorts in Congress would ever sign on to sign themselves out of business?
Well, I am hopeful. It is an uphill fight, but I am hopeful. As you noted, I've introduced a constitutional amendment to mandate term limits, 2 terms for senators, 3 terms for members of the House. And, one of the things that is abundantly clear, one of the things this election was an overwhelming mandate for, is people are fed up with the corruption of Washington. Frankly, the corruption of both parties, not just Democrats, Republicans too, where politicians get in office forever and ever and ever, and this town is corrupting the special interests, the lobbyists. They begin funding you. Your reelection depends on them, and you see good people with good intentions who just get corrupted by Washington. Donald Trump campaigned on draining the swamp. I think there are few more effective ways to do that than term limits. And 80% of the American people support term limits. Republicans support it, but so do independents, so do Democrats. And so I am fighting hard in Congress to convince my colleagues we need to demonstrate we actually heard the voters on November. And I hope we take it up for a vote and get people on record. And I hope we get the votes to pass it because it's where the people are.
Ted, it's always an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day. All my best to your family, and let's talk again soon, my friend.